Stardate. Caca!
Ah!
Welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a kind of smart, kind of funny podcast covering new and classic Trek. I am a face made on an inanimate object that is made for companionship. Your captain, Mariah Gossett. And with me on the view screen, we have...
Your positronic Pinocchio, Paul Satachet.
Yes.
Yeah, see, I'm working on the puns. So there you go.
You're getting...
How did I do?
You're catching on 100%. A plus.
A+.
Clyde will be joining us in just a few minutes. He's just running a few minutes behind, but we wanted to jump on at our scheduled stream time. Tonight, we are covering the 7th episode of the 3rd season of Lower Decks, A Mathematically Perfect Redemption. But first, we just have a few reminders. Paul, can you remind the listeners about where to subscribe to the podcast?
Yes, listeners, you can subscribe to the podcast at Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. All our links are at StarTrekPod.co. And if you love our content and like to help us, we have a Patreon, and for just $2 per episode, it could really do us some good at patreon.com/StarTrekPod.
Correct. Thank you, Paul.
Correct.
You did it.
I did it. I'm a big boy now.
You're really nailing this co-hosting, Paul. I appreciate you. And tonight, if you are participating in our live chat, you can do so by typing out capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod, so that we can kind of flag it if it's a question or a comment you have that you want us to pay attention to. Also, in a few minutes, we're going to get to some of our spicy thoughts. What did we overarching thoughts about this particular episode? If you have some quick takes you want to share, you can do a capital HF, capital HF in the chat, and we will take a look at those as well. All right, Paul, I think it's time to dive into this planet of hillbilly birds.
Hillbilly birds, cacaw, indeed.
Cacaw. Discuss A Mathematically Perfect Redemption. This episode was directed by Jason Zurich and written by the incredible Ann Kim, the mind of Ann Kim. And Clyde is here. Hello,
Clyde's
Clyde.
here. He made it. Yay. He beamed in. Look at that. I'm
Yes.
working it.
Working it in, beaming in. Clyde has made it. Yes. So this episode was directed by Jason Zurich, written by Ann Kim. And Clyde, you're just in time. I think you know what time it is. It is time for... Time for some hot freaks.
Hot tricks.
Clyde, what did you think about this episode?
Oh, do I have to go first? Because
yeah, you haven't been here yet. You haven't had to talk yet. It's all you, Clyde.
I'm going to say something that I have not said in what feels like 4 years of podcasting about Trek. Maybe I've said this once. I didn't love it. I didn't love it.
Gasp.
It's big for me because I'm a big fan, and so it's hard for me to say I didn't love it, but I didn't love it. It just, other than there were a couple moments that I like For the Flock, I thought was great. But I was struggling with a couple things and trying to figure out, is this too much Rick and Morty? And then I realized that Peanut Hamper is voiced by Heather Donahue, I realized, oh, this is like a scene out of You're the Worst, which is a show that I love.
Mm-hmm.
But when you take You're the Worst and smash it into Star Trek, it became a little like, what am I watching? And so while there were these moments of kind of cuteness and laughter, I missed the ongoing plot of our normal characters, though I am assuming that this was a part of a plot device for something else. So that's kind of where I'm at.
All right, Paul.
Wow, somber moment.
Your thoughts? Sorry. I did want to just correct. So Ann Kim, who wrote this episode, does not work on Rick and Morty. So she previously wrote High School Musical, the series, and also wrote for New Girl,
which I love.
Oh wow. It's Jess. Who's that girl?
It's Jess.
let's see. My hot freak. I thought it was a perfectly adequate Rick and Morty episode.
Wow.
No, and that's not bad. That's not bad. Like, and I
Mhm.
think that for me, like, I feel like it's a trend in like newer shows, especially like 10-episode episodics,
Mhm.
to go and do something non main cast. Like, you know,
Mhm.
I use the example of Master of None, where every of the 2 seasons, like there's a episode where it just goes and speaks to a different part of whatever, whether a different character or the world. And I was like, okay, if this is this episode, I will just rate it on that merit. Like, you know, like there was an episode in season 2, like the 9th episode, like the one where you go into various other crews lower decks,
Mhm.
like, you know, the Vulcan and the Klingon. And I thought that's probably the apex of doing that for Star Trek right now. Like, I go, like, that's what you're trying to hit, because that was hitting concept and delivering on the, like, oh, here's another wink at the world.
Mhm.
And I felt like this didn't quite do that, although you could make an argument that, like, this is a homage to that episode where Kirk is stuck on the Native American planet.
Mhm.
Or like or when I was watching with my wife, she was saying like, oh, is this like the Picard episode where he gets like with the flute, you know, in Next Generation, where, like, you know, he's just, you know, everyone's going like, oh, he's
Mhm.
sleeping, and then, you know, Picard's like going like, oh, where's my kid? Oh, you know, my planet has no water, you know. so I could see all that. Like, you know, they made a choice making it with Peanut Hamper, who isn't main cast, so that made it feel less like, if it were Boimler or anyone else, I would have been completely into the episode for me.
Hey, Paul, I love what you just said, right? That they kind of focused on Peanut Hamper. And I would add to that a character that I don't know that we like.
Yeah.
For instance, this would have been really interesting if they had done an entire episode on Jennifer coming after like the last week's episode.
Oh yeah, sure.
This would have been a really interesting, or the last two weeks.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been a really interesting episode, like just around Jennifer. I might have been into that.
Yeah, I think anyone, like for me, I go Ransom, you know, because, like, you know, you it could be anything, and any one of them would have been a great thing. So they chose Peanut Hamper, which is a bold choice. But like I think Ryan Murphy said this to someone on the Glee project. He goes, "Oh, Charlie, you're always going to make the bold choice, but the bold choice isn't always the right choice."
So I'll be the odd person out. I mean, I really loved this episode.
Beautiful. That's right.
And that's why it's great, right? And
Yeah.
and I can 100%. I hear all of your criticisms, and I think they're all very valid. I think I am just that person who sits at the intersection of, like, was I entertained?
Mhm.
Did this hit? I like things that are so bad they come around to being so good again. That's like a genre that I thoroughly enjoy. And to me, this fit that kind of niche. It was a character that no one likes, but is iconic. And we did not know what happened to that character. I was very surprised there was no B plot bringing us back to the ship in any way, shape, or form. I was kind of waiting for that. And that'll be kind of my criticism of the episode, was I would have been interested to have seen where we were in place in time with their other characters, right? They had a moment that sort of let us know when there was a bit of a time jump with a season change before the wedding. But it sort of reminded me of another episode where no, it's a very love-hate, which is Threshold from Voyager.
Threshold. Is that the one with the
lizard babies? Yes.
Yeah, lizard babies.
Yes.
Like when Paris hooks up with Janeway.
Janeway, yes. It's another, you either love or hate that episode, I feel like. And
I love the fact that, like, you know, here are the best minds in all of Starfleet, can't break warp 10, but like Neelix.
You know.
Neelix over a pot of coffee goes like, oh, what about this? Oh yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I would, we have, again, some, I feel like it's a 50-50 split in the chat as well. Maybe not, maybe more of like a 70-30. I don't think this was everyone's favorite episode. Kieran says, we've been waiting all season for Talin and we got Peanut Hamper instead.
Nice.
Maybe a rewatch will help, but easily among my least favorite LDS episodes. Pod, when Peanut Hamper says fuck is something we space folks say when we're stranded on a backwater planet with no culture. I laughed out loud at work. That is a fun one. Marge, what is the mathematically perfect redemption? Was not this for Peanut Hamper. Let's see. I'm going to get to that later. Choopy, I see your comment though. Carmen, Hot Freak, I didn't love it. However, it did feel very the original series, and the writing was clever to fit a whole story in 30 minutes. I will need to rewatch it. Agreed. Some people think this is the wrong time for the season. The chat is on fire about this episode, y'all.
Yeah.
Pod, Peanut Hamper is like lore, a character you love to hate. Have we met the AR before in Star Trek? We have not.
So I will say there's one that I thought nailed it, and it's this one. Within a 26 episode season, a one-off is excusable, but not a 10 episode season. I'm kind of expecting this to tie in somehow. But like so many limited, I'm just kind of like, what happened here? And especially because I've been looking forward to this like every week. I actually just to be honest with you, Mariah. So we get screeners. I hadn't seen this one in advance, and so earlier this week I was so excited about the next episode. I went to look at it and realized that they had expired, and so I've been looking forward to this since like Monday. And so it was up early this morning and was like, yo, I'm going to watch this, and was like, what the hell am I watching?
I feel like that is a justifiable reaction to this episode. But I think that's why I like it so much, is that I feel like I appreciate the change in rhythm at this point in the season. I was kind of hoping we'd get something moving that's sort of going to moment us to the last half. But I think there is something here, because now we've kind of come back into dealing with the Drukmani scavengers that show up. So I feel like there's some potential there. But I also think it's fun to make things because they're fun. And that's why I think I like this episode.
That's fair.
Yes, like, you are allowed to have your thoughts.
Yes. I mean, the other thing is, like, if you're sitting in a writer's room and someone's like, it's sitting there, right? It's like, it's going to happen. There's the what happened to Peanut Hamper, right? Like that's sitting on a board for somewhere for a while. And they've been sitting there being like, when is this going to make sense? And so far, I have trusted them and I've not been disappointed. And so I'm hoping it will propel us in an interesting direction.
Like, I think the episode in itself is fine. The question is like, did it scratch my lower decks itch? And the answer for me is like, sure. But it's not like last week's episode where like, oh yeah. It's like, okay, this will do. But yeah.
So go ahead, Clyde.
I was gonna say it did not scratch my lower decks itch. I'll tell you what it did. It had me going, when is Prodigy starting? That's literally what happened. Like I was like,
if I had a RuPaul Drag Race shade rattle, I'd hit that now as sound effect right now.
Love it.
I mean, I'm being honest. This is probably a little bit more honest than I've been.
That's right.
But I think for me, Lower Decks has just escalated, not even by season, but by episode. Like it's just gotten really, really good. And so this was a splash of cold water when you were not expecting it. It was just like, whoa. It was very jarring, but I think that was the point. So when I step back, I look and go, for what they were doing, it was masterful, right?
Yeah,
Paul,
exactly.
I love what you said. I thought this was a perfectly good episode of Rick and Morty, right? Like I thought, like if you had picked this up and put it in Rick and Morty, I was like, birds like on a planet with birds having sex with machines. This is so perfect, Rick and Morty.
They have like the best line too. Like there's the part where Peter Hamper goes like, it's not a flying snake. If everything has wings, it's just a snake.
You could literally hear, like if you squint hard enough, right, you can hear Rick saying that, right?
Yeah,
like that is definitely a Rick lie. And so I look at that and go, okay, so if I was ready for it, I've been like, man, this is great. So when I look at what it is, it's not that it's a bad episode. It just was not what I was expecting, and it's gonna take some processing. But there's some moments.
Talk to my therapist about this.
Yeah, I can't wait till next week. You go like, you know what, guys? I was wrong. This is my favorite episode of all. Like
No.
I did want to ask you guys, prior to this episode, have you had any lingering thoughts about what happened to Peanut Hamper? Have you been craving a Peanut Hamper episode or a return of the Peanut?
Listen, I think it was summed up by their choice in giving us a previously on, right? It's the first time they've done that.
Yeah, we also did not get an opening credits.
I thought the opening like sequence was actually pretty cool though. I did like that.
Yeah.
I thought it was dope, but like the fact that they had to do a reminder when it was like oh, I was like, what? Peanut Hamper? Oh, like it took me a minute to like. So to answer your question, Ryan, no, I hadn't been thinking. When they going to like? I am literally thinking. When do we find out who Talin and like I'm waiting for that. Peanut Hamper did not get an additional thought. No.
Like I for me, I was going like, oh, I don't really like exocoms. maybe
highly unlikable.
Yeah, like maybe it's me, but like I prefer my androids bipedal. I said it. It's out there. I said it. It's out there. Like get all this Star Trek hate.
Here's something that's interesting though. I think was it last week or the week before when we were all doing our lower decks like caricatures? I think they had an exocom as one of the things in it. And I don't remember, like I remember thinking, I've seen that before, but what is it? Now I'm looking back and going, oh yeah, okay.
That thing that was around. I did really enjoy the character design of the Aors. I thought that they were really interesting. I think it's fun, specifically in lower decks, when we get to come across different species that would be really hard to pull off in full prosthetic makeup in a similar way. So I always enjoy when they get to kind of either bring people back or update some folks or give us something new. Also, Rada is voiced by Harry Shum Jr., who I think is a very underutilized actor. He's really lovely.
I played poker with him once at a charity thing. And my thought was like, on the show, on Glee, your head doesn't look that big. In real life, it doesn't look that big either. I didn't say it out loud, because that would be rude. But I was going like, oh, like, because they say that, like, most TV actors have big heads. And I always looked on Glee like, oh, you do not seem like you have a big head. And he doesn't.
That's good to know he's proportional. IRL. He was very proportional as an owl alien.
Exactly.
And some people, he's from Glee. I think he's also on Grey's Anatomy now. I believe.
Is he really?
I think so. That show's on like its 100th season or something like that. And then his dad, Kaltorius, is voiced by James C., who's also a pretty iconic voice actor. He did like Kung Fu Panda and a few other, like in like the Jackie Chan animated series and a bunch of other things. So I thought that was some fun. I always like when they get some fun guest actors to pop in.
Agree. And like I said before, Heather, if you haven't seen You're the Worst, Heather Donahue, who plays Peanut Hamper, is from You're the worst. I love that show, but it is a show that I don't tell very many people that I love because it's so far out there. It is kind of like, just what if people just did not care and just did whatever to whatever? That it's somewhat funny, but it also tackles some really interesting issues around PTSD and depression.
Yeah, I wanted to
I
to
can't
bring this
recommend it,
back
but I
around.
do want to recommend it. It's kind of hard to say
Um,
anything else.
yeah, to bring this back around. So one of the other reasons is I actually really like this episode, and what felt the most Trek to me about this episode was its like larger commentary on society. So this very much to me, it felt like Peanut Hamper is playing that I'm like a colonialist, white savior type coming into this quote unquote primitive culture with my technology and my better ways of doing things, but you end up just making everything worse for everyone involved. And I was like, this is an accurate portrayal of colonialism. And, you know, it's like someone who's like, oh, but I have changed. I have learned the ways of this, you know, this indigenous community, and now I'm a better person for it. But in the inside, you're still not actually a better person for it because you've been educated in this bad system. And still have these lingering thoughts about the society you have now tried to push your agenda upon. So to me, it felt very Trek in that you came away with a thinker.
with the robot and the owl people.
Yeah.
Just perfect.
It's a perfect analogy. I don't see how y'all didn't see it right away.
It's right in our faces, like the black and white episode. You know, it's right there.
Right on the nose. So yeah, did y'all pick up on anything like that? What did you think? What was kind of your thoughts about specifically to once we get some Federation officers on the planet who are like, oh, because you've done something good, we can maybe look past the bad thing you did, but just kidding, you still haven't actually changed as an intelligent entity.
Clyde?
So I thought the colonialism kind of reference was really interesting, especially because usually the way we see it is the reformed redemptive arc, and this was just like at the end, Peanut Hamper is kind of like, yeah, no, I wasn't. Yeah, I'm not trying to stay with you. Like, it's like a very destructive way to get out of a wedding. But I also thought it was this interesting commentary on technology, because you've got this culture that has said, hey, look, we went one way where we had the most advanced technology around, and it destroyed us. And then we went the other way, where it's to just remove all technology together, and now we're vulnerable. And it's kind of like we overcorrected. I thought it was an interesting, an interesting commentary on that. And I think particularly now, because there's so much technology around, the question is, are you on one edge or the other? Are you somewhere in the middle? So, and then how they didn't give us any answers, but they asked an interesting question. So I that was something that I kind of looked at and was like, oh, I'm fascinated by this dialogue.
Yeah, it's like, what would happen if we as a society realized like, oh, we are spending a lot of money and technology on just fighting with other people. What would happen if we decided to just stop doing that?
Yeah. What if we just turned off the internet?
Yeah.
And we might lose this show. So that's a non-starter.
No-go.
It's a non-starter.
It's a non-go. Yeah, this was a really dense story episode as well. I thought it like we go on such a journey with Peanut Hamper, from being lost in space with a Castaways reference to Wilson, where she has Susan, to then warping into this other society, and then having to like be a fish out of water sort of moment, but then get I don't know. It was such a, I will say the romantic relationship between the two of them felt like a bit of a surprise to me at the beginning. But then I was like, I guess, why would you make him a hot bird if we didn't want him to be in a relationship? And I don't know how I guess you can judge if it's a hot bird.
I mean, like with your mammal normative, viewpoint, Mariah, like it's so I don't know, man.
Look, I'll say this. So one of the benefits of being a patron of the show is that you get to hang out in the Slack. And so I've been in the Slack a couple times today.
Mhm.
I've been on the spoiler channel. I did a rewatch with some of our patrons, and the subject of the hot bird came up consistently.
Yes.
So yes, definitively he was a hot bird.
Yes. I was going to say, there's always like, I don't know. Does everyone remember their first cartoon crush? What was your first like cartoon crush?
First cartoon crush. Wow,
that's easy. That's an easy answer, right? One of
Is
the
it?
best cartoon crushes of all time, Jessica Rabbit. Hello.
Yeah. I think mine was the Fox Robin Hood.
Fox Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
I think for me, it's it's the same. It's Wonder Woman on the Super Friends,
Mm.
and it tracks with like Linda Carter live action.
It just
like,
progressed.
I don't know which one I saw first, but like I've always had a thing for Wonder Woman, strong women. I sharing too much. Back to the pod.
Oh man, I this is a little bit of a tangent, but this week I was watching a masterclass day with Alex Kurtzman, talking about like writing for TV and film and the differences, whatever. And I had totally forgotten that he was a showrunner on Xena, Warrior Princess, and
Was he?
Hercules. Yes.
Oh, like I know one of the creators of Xena.
Yeah, he was like 26. He was like this super young, like head of the writers room for Xena. And I was just like, man, Alex Kurtzman really writing me so many crushes throughout the entirety of my life.
I mean,
Lucy Lawless is flawless.
Lucy Lawless, absolutely. Like when I was courting my wife, it was either my wife, Lucy Lawless, or Shania Twain. And Shania and Lucy did not return my calls because I didn't know them. So like
Lucy.
She's great. Oh no. Okay,
I can't even attest to whether or not Xena Warrior Princess was actually a good show or not. Because
it's perfect camp. It's perfect camp television.
I mean, because at that age, especially as a teenage boy, there's no way I could convince you that I was watching it for the plot, right? Like, it's like if I'm watching it for the plot, then of course I'm also watching Hercules, which I am not. I am watching Xena. So, yeah, I'm okay.
Anyway, hot cartoons.
Where
back
are
to Star
we?
Trek.
Back to Star Trek.
I warned you last week, Paul, that we go like it just can go in an interesting place, and there we are.
Yeah, back to it, some things to talk about within the episode. So for a while, I was concerned that Peanut Hamper was breaking the Prime Directive. I mean, she's obviously not super concerned with breaking a lot of Starfleet rules, but then I like how they wrote themselves out of that with this whole reveal of their technology underneath and like, oh, we've built our society on top of the ruins.
That doesn't count though. Like that doesn't count. Like if you break the rule, if you go steal from someone and then like and then someone goes like, oh, you can have it. Like you still stole.
Yeah, no, she's still like not good. I mean, Peanut Hamper is not good through and through, and that's definitely what we've learned in this particular episode. But this was one of those things I was just listening to. There's an episode of Las Culturistas with two of the creators of Los Spookies. I don't know if y'all are fans of that show on HBO, but they were talking about how in their particular writer's room they lead with the jokes and they lead with the comedy beats more than they lead with what are we trying to actually say in this episode. And to me, that kind of felt like what this episode was also like. Like we are going to
very astute.
we're leading with jokes. And because it was dense. I mean, there was plenty of laugh out loud Peanut Hamper lines for me in this episode.
Absolutely. Like I thought it reminded me of a lot of things. It reminded me of Star Wars, Rick and Morty, like a bunch of Star Trek episodes. Like like anytime you have bird people, it's just something,
Mhm.
so yeah, but I felt in some ways like to what you're saying, Mariah, like it felt like that they kind of led with the concept first, and rather than the arc first. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And which is fine for an episode.
Yeah. We've now locked her up in a
Except for
box.
except for Clyde. Clyde, not quite, not okay for Clyde.
No. I mean, I'm looking at it and trying to think about some of the things that did sit with me, and I was just thinking like, what did it remind me of? I think there were some moments. It was a little Planet of the Apes for me too,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Um, even though it looked more like Birdman, the was it the Hanna-Barbera cartoon,
Mhm.
but
Exactly.
it felt more like kind of Planet of the Apes. Like you've got someone who's landed on this planet who comes from a different type of society, and it becomes a problem, especially earlier on when they're like, we don't want them here. But yeah, it was I mean, listen, like I said, it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but I do think there's some genius in it.
Yeah, there's some lines too that just like where they felt like throwaways, but were so dense with the joke. Like she says, one day I'd like to, or I thought one day I'd just go to Free Cloud with the intent of being a Dabo girl, but then I ended up joining Starfleet instead, only to mess that up in the end. And to me, the jump from Dabo girl to Starfleet officer as like a non-organic being is fascinating.
Well, I thought it was interesting because that line stuck out to me because just last week we had Boimler playing Dabo, right? And
Mhm.
yelling out Dabo. And I was like, oh, like I thought that was a very clever reference to something that was brought to our forefront
Mhm.
just a moment ago. And so I was like, oh, like I didn't have to think like, wait, what was Dabo? It was like, oh, I know exactly what it is.
Yeah, it almost feels like last week they were like, okay, we're going to slap you in the face with familiar characters, familiar places, and a lot of nostalgia. And then this week we're going to go off the rails. We're
Mhm.
lulling you into a false sense of security before we go really weird.
Oh, I wonder if the Sky Snake is a reference to like Raising with Wolves. Like the
Oh, you
flying
mean
snake,
dancing?
no, Raised by Wolves,
No,
like
Oh,
the
Raised by Wolves.
yeah,
Oh,
the
because like
new show.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
so
Isn't it based on a book?
I think a short story.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah. Anyway, like it just hit my head. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot of things. There's a lot of things there.
Yes. We do ultimately get some fun space fighting once the Drukmani come in because Peanut Hamper called them in order to make herself look like a hero. So we have a little bit of a fight there. We also then get Rada, the sort of son of the leader, retaking the big mothership up and saving the day. And ultimately, it was nice to see people saving themselves, not the savior saving them, right? Even though Peanut Hamper tried to take all of the credit for everything. But I thought it was a fun flip flop because I was like, oh, this would be too easy and too nice of a bow if like Peanut Hamper saves the day, right?
Oh, definitely. Like I actually like a jerk. In my consumption of media. Like like a
Mhm.
good jerk is mwah. Well, it has to be good.
Mhm.
I don't know if Peanut Hamper is a good jerk. There's not enough of her. Like right,
Mhm.
you've only seen 1.5 episodes of her. So like one of the things that I thought was a little extreme was like, oh, did she go to like like Daystrom jail? For what? For
Self-aware
yeah.
megalomaniacal computer storage.
But
Yeah.
what is she really? It's not like she was Landru and took over a planet, and all she did was basically go like, oh, I kind of want to get off this planet. I want to like play hero for a bit, and so like she's just a sociopath, not like.
But she did essentially commit like a terroristic act and destroyed
Mhm.
an entire village.
She did.
I don't know. I don't know if she was expecting that. Like like it might be in the ballpark, But I don't think she's going like, oh, they're going to come in and destroy the village. They're just going to come in and like she has to call, the Cerritos and blah, 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 blah. But like, I don't know if I don't want to be the guy defending Hamper here.
Right.
I'm not that guy.
She did try to call the Borg. That is also true.
She did try to call
Well,
the Borg.
that is very true. That's very true. Like,
it might have been a third. It was third strike. You're out. Like
fair. That is absolutely true. Like I yield. My point is I'm off.
I don't know if putting her in jail, in that particular jail, was the best idea.
Yes.
I mean, to me, the idea of, hey, why don't we take a bunch of megalomaniac, super intelligent computers? You know what we should do? Put them in the same room with each other.
Oh yeah,
that's a good idea.
I'm fully waiting for the episode that takes place at that institute and something goes horrifically wrong. Like,
yes. Just like that's
it's like the Chekhov's gun of lower decks.
Yeah, like it's funny too because like it's the Daystrom Institute, right? And like Daystrom in TOS, like he created this computer that was multitronic. It was like pre-positronic, and it was supposed to take over the Enterprise, and it went crazy and started killing everyone. So the fact that you have like an institute where you're keeping all these killer computers by a guy who created a killer computer is funny.
So okay, to think about canon a little bit, right? We know the lower decks is canon. Picard happens about 10 years after this?
Sure. Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
Right. So the Daystrom Institute is technically still there.
No, yeah.
Right. So
Absolutely.
It's not.
Well, yeah, it doesn't mean something bad hasn't happened there. Starfleet Academy has been destroyed many a times.
Oh yeah, a bunch of times.
And I will say, like once there's that break, like the robot revolt, like Picard isn't coming fixing it. It's the Cerritos. So
yeah.
So how bad could it have been?
Exactly. It's going to be like, like a couple of them who can't do too much damage start doing some bad things, and the Cerritos has to go fix it. Let me see. Did y'all have any other thoughts about this episode?
Like one of my favorite little bits was that when Peanut Hamper was floating around in the opening, you saw Rutherford's implant.
Yes.
And so my question is like, is Badgie still around?
That is a question.
That is a question, right? Because I like Badgie. Like that's a jerk.
A homicidal jerk.
Yeah, no, but he wears it on his sleeve. Like, he owns it, or it owns it.
I did like when she I guess administers the antivenom to the chief. When she added, he was like, "How do you feel?" I was like, "I feel great." She's like, "Oh yeah, I gave you some vitamins too." Like, I thought that was a nice kind of funny moment. She did have some really good lines. Peanut Hamper had some nice lines.
Yeah, there was quite a few little laugh out loud lines of just like, "Oh, your bits are complicated," or like, yeah, just a lot of really silly one-liners. I think I had some of them pulled up. Let me see here.
What was it? It was like the what of the goal or the fate of the few outweigh the fate of the many. She was like, what about the
fate of the me?
The fate of the me.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, we also had, "Hey Doyle, how are those stomach worms clearing out? Oh yes, my fecal matter is back to being oily and white. Great, but also gross." The song, I'm full of song when I'm with you. Caw. Oh, you scared the living bleep out of me. Never do that again.
You're still doing it.
Yeah. Oh, I long for the touch of your nozzle, but our pieces are so different. Yeah, then the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, baby, but aren't but you aren't even a few. You're just one. No, I'm Starfleet for her small moment of redemption. Yeah. Oh, get back here. When Captain Freeman's trying to capture her. Get back here right now, ensign. That's an order. Smell you later. Oh yeah, and I mean that literally because y'all shit everywhere. Peanut Hamper, is it? Oh, I must say that's a mathematically perfect name. Thanks. Who the hell are you? I'm Agamus, and I think you and I could do awful things together. And then I thought it was really funny when all of them started evil laughing, and then she's like, "Shut up! This is my evil laugh moment."
Yeah.
One of the things that I kind of wish was there, but for no reason other than because I think it's hilarious, is if you ever like type in like owl legs. You know,
oh
like,
yeah, have you ever seen when they pull up their feathers and they're just those weird little legs?
And so I kind of was hoping that, you know, like you'd see like the owl legs here, like even on the hot owl.
I mean, it was kind of like an interesting design, but yeah, I think if someone like pushed up their feathers, you would see they have weird skinny little legs. Are you looking up owl legs, Clyde?
My hands are there, but I'm just not sure. It's one of those things that was like, hey man, you should Google this. I'm like, man, I trust you?
It's really not spooky. It's more funny than anything. But yeah, it's like,
man. That is just weird. That is just very,
now
very
imagine that animated.
Weird.
Yeah. Because like you imagine
that would have been funny.
That would have been another good joke.
Yeah, because it would have been, you know what it would have been? You would have had this hot bird with the 6-pack abs, right?
But with chicken legs.
With chicken legs. And I'm like, dude, you'd be like, you can't skip leg day, man. You cannot skip leg day.
Even the owls cannot skip leg day. Okay, my final question for y'all is, do you think this is a Lower Decks episode?
No.
Paul?
You know, like, I'm a person who is a stickler for structure and concept, and the concept of Lower Decks, as I understand it, because, you know, who am I? I'm just some like really handsome, amazing. Anyway, android is that like Lower Decks is here are the people who grind it out against the backdrop of the most amazing things that are happening in the universe, or you know, and so here we really lose that backdrop. We're just with one person, and you know, like I feel like that in itself has made it away from, you know, what a Lower Decks episode is. It's not outside of Star Trek, like I said. You know, like Star Trek does do these one-offs where like, you know, Kirk loses his memory and is like, you know, and now he does CPR on like some, you know, I guess Native Americans, I guess, you know, like whatever, the preservers, you know, like, but like those are far and few in between, and they're people who we know. So in that way, it's really like I watch a lot of Top Chef, or I used to at least. And what Tom Colicchio would say is like the real problem is when you start changing multiple ingredients in the thing, and there's a cascade effect that makes it, you know, that you can't control. So like you might change your lasagna, and instead of using veal or meat, you use like tuna. Don't do that. But like, you know, but you can control that. But if you then change it, the pasta, instead of like pasta to like, you know, like snails or something, then it's gonna quickly become nonlinear. And I feel like they changed one too many things to keep it Lower Decksy. To me, Mariah, what about you? Do you think this is a Lower Decks episode? Be honest.
I do, because we still followed a member of the Lower Decks crew. Sure. We still followed an ensign who we were introduced to within the confines of our Lower Decks crew. And it is just another tertiary episode. Like when y'all were saying if this was an episode about Jennifer, if this was an episode about one of the other crews, and like when we went and saw some of the other crews and other ships, to me, it's still someone who doesn't know what they're doing, getting tossed into a really big situation and having to learn a hard lesson at the end, which to me is the format of Lower Decks.
Sure.
And I am also a person, though, Paul, who would order something like a chicken tikka masala lasagna. So I might not be the person to,
like I would too.
to answer this question.
Because you gotta try it.
You gotta try it.
That's why
you certainly do not have to try chicken tikka masala lasagna.
Why? It is sauce. It is a protein. You can put in the noodles. There's already cream in the sauce, which is basically just a spicy bechamel.
It's a fusion that to me feels like it violates culture, right?
I mean, I've had a chicken tikka masala pizza.
Wow, that's strong words.
Listen, I love Indian food, but I try to respect the culture.
Chicken tikka masala is also not actually Indian food. You're already starting with something that's been removed from its culture and created and palated for a bunch of other people.
But
okay,
we get Clyde's point. Clyde saying
I'm just
it
saying,
sounds gross.
It's like I wouldn't really be looking for like a collard greens lasagna either. So
what we should do is we should get an episode of us on the Patreon, and we should make chicken tikka masala lasagna and feed it to Clyde and see what he thinks.
I'm gonna deep freeze it, Clyde. I'm gonna mail it to your house.
and I'll definitely go. Okay, here we go. Chicken tikka. Oh, this is quite good. Is it? No, I knew it wasn't going to be good.
Well, we will see for sure. No, I am moderately adventurous with food, but that just sounds like a big clash of culture.
But what if you called it Andorian lasagna? You wouldn't know, and all of a sudden you're at a Star Trek restaurant, Andorian lasagna, chicken with butter sauce and pasta. You eat, you go, oh wow, it's like chicken tikka masala. But I'm just saying, it's all framing, baby. It's all framing. You could I could sell you a drink called Borg macronutrients, and you would buy it and you would drink it and you would say it's great.
Here's the tough part. The tough part is I had chicken tikka masala on Tuesday, and I had lasagna yesterday. So I'm literally trying to combine these two things in my head and going, that's like a clash of flavors that I just don't know is gonna work. So that is what I'm struggling with. So
I'm gonna figure out a recipe, and I will
That's right.
I will do something.
All you gotta do is make the pasta blue, and all of a sudden it's oh my god, it's
so okay. So before bring us back around, one more thing I'll say is I had the same question that Nicole had, right? So Nicole says, I kept wondering how Peanut was staying powered on. My thought was, wouldn't Peanut Hamper run out of power or the ability to replicate things? It doesn't seem like that's an endless supply.
I do wonder what her power source is. Potentially there could be some solar options going on.
There was some talk about it, right? In the very beginning, the owl leader goes you were rebuilding your power, whatever, something like that. So
but don't you need something like a component to replicate things? And isn't that a limited support? You don't just replicate things out of midair, right?
I don't know how you replicate things.
Yeah, I am not sure about Peanut Hamper's full technological capabilities. But yeah.
But
it's a question.
Let's say that it's a not to get truly nerdy, she has a mini antimatter, power cell or something like that. You could just use that, and you can just convert, I don't know. It would depend on how much antimatter she had. That would be the answer to that.
All right. Well, I'm not gonna derail this by asking super techie nerd Trek questions, but
I was gonna say I'm actually going to be potentially talking to Dr. Aaron again within the next week, so we could add it to the pile of questions if we would like to.
Sure. No.
Do it.
It'd be very interesting to see what her response would be like. It's a cartoon.
No, usually she's like, that's a great question, and we'll explain it.
That's right. Well,
or will tell me it's a question for the other side.
Exocoms happen to have a forced quantum singularity in them, similar to Romulan, warp drives and blah.
All possible.
All possible. That's right.
All possible. Okay, y'all. I think that might be it for this episode. That will continue to haunt us for the rest of the season, I'm sure, in many ways.
Yeah.
Just like a burp after a chicken tikka masala lasagna.
Yeah, I'm gonna close all these pictures of owl legs because that's gonna haunt me too.
Maybe we'll call it like what would be a layer just like an Andorian something that isn't lasagna.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and I'll think of something clever. Andorian layered sauce vehicle.
All right.
All of those things. Thank you to everyone for tuning in live who got to join us. It was a great crowd tonight. We appreciate y'all. If you are listening to us in the audio stream, thank you so much. You can leave us a review on Apple. You can also rate us on Spotify. We appreciate that as well. Find links to everything and more at StarTrekPod.co. You can also visit us at patreon.com/StarTrekPod. If you need to continue to talk about this episode, that is the place to do it. So for just $2 an episode, you can join us over there. Clyde, how else can people find us on the internet?
Check us out on Twitter and our socials at Star Trek Pod. And shout out to Karen who runs our Twitter. Thank you, Karen.
We appreciate you. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you all next time. Live long and prosper. Bye.
Bye.